Greetings, friends from Devox. Today we are going to talk about the reptilian extraterrestrial race. What is their history? What is their impact on our galaxy? And what are they doing on our planet?
Hello everyone. First I wanted to thank you for being all there at Devox. I really like this picture from the Devox website. If only humans like us could sense what robots can perceive. Not only technology, exoskeletons, but also machine learning to augment human capabilities. One day, that could be great. And it would be even better running Android things, obviously. But let's start from the beginning. If you think that Android is awesome and reptilians suck, then you're totally at the right place today. So Android is awesome, and especially as a developer, because we have so many great tools. I mean, look at our IDE, our build system, our libraries. It's a real pleasure to have that level of quality to help us building daily apps, really good apps. And another cool thing with Android is that the code we write can run on so many different hardwares. Android is like everywhere. The Android apps we write can run on phones and tablets, watches, TVs, cars. And now, with Android things, we can target a new category of devices, or homemade devices. And that's huge, because now in 2017, if you can build an app, you can build a device. You can make crazy devices, such as your own 8-bit distributed piano to play Sia's Titanium song or whatever you like. If you prefer to play music like a scientist, buy yourself some beer cans, a capacitive touch sensor, and write an Android app that detects touch events so you can start playing electronic music. If you're into cute stuff, you can build a lucky cat that moves its paw every time you receive a notification on your phone. And you can make it communicate with your phone using Bluetooth Low Energy, for instance. And last example, if you like chocolates, you can create a robot powered by the Google Assistant that tells you some jokes and gives you some sweets. Give me a chocolate bar.
Here you are.
What's interesting here is that you don't need to own a 3D printer to get started with Android things or anything with electronics. Cardboard is great for prototyping, and this robot here was just made using a shoebox. So, okay, it smells like feet a little, but it gives chocolates. That's cool. Oh, and if you're not familiar with the Google Assistant, it's the artificial technology inside the Google Home device that provides a conversational interface to Google. And you can embed that exact same technology in any of your Android or Android Things projects, also on your web project if you want. Not only that, but you can also extend it to your custom needs. In my case, understanding that I want some chocolate bars and give me some. So you can really integrate it and custom it, and that's cool. What you have to know is that all those projects were made with Android Things in less than a day each. So you can really create fun stuff like really quickly. And you may wonder now something like, okay, but why using Android Things? Because to be honest, if we exclude the Google Assistant robot earlier, we could create almost all those projects using an Arduino, for instance. And remember that if you need to build a very simple, stupid, limited device, don't use Android Things for that. That's overkill. Unless, of course, your goal is to try Android Things and have fun with it. That's a good reason. But if you want to create a very stupid device, very small device, just use an Arduino or a microcontroller if you can, of course. Android Things is not intended for very simple, stupid IoT devices. Instead, it's a very good platform for devices that require a good amount of computation power, such as security cameras or smart doorbells, for instance. If you want to embed some artificial intelligence or do some image processing locally, meaning without having to consistently ask for a cloud service to process information and give it back, if you want local processing, Android Things is good for those kind of use cases. I may repeat this a lot today, but don't forget, Android Things is Android. You can create, if you want, a smart device using Kotlin, Arc Java, the architecture components. You can test your IoT project with JUnit and Mockito. And of course, you can use all Google services. So let's say that you need pushes. What you would do if you want to push notifications or just pushes on a mobile phone, what you would do usually is integrate Firebase cloud messaging inside your mobile application, and 10 minutes later, you're done. You can do the same with Android Things, of course, because Android Things is Android. If you need a secure platform, Android Things is a good choice. It's secure and always up to date. You only focus on writing the application part, and Google is in charge of embedding that application inside the Android Things operating system and delivering firmware updates to your customer devices. So it's not you who will be in charge of pushing security updates to your users. Google will publish everything. So even if you bought an Android Things device that isn't maintained anymore by the manufacturer, it will still receive security updates regularly because Google will be in charge of it. And that's great because, you know, security is one of the biggest issues with IoT devices, and it's not really one with Android Things. Finally, not only Android Things is great for prototyping stuff quickly, but it's also designed to help you building professional mass market products. Here's a list of compatible boards so far on which you can install Android Things. Raspberry Pi and NXP are the most famous one. If you're a maker, you want to prototype stuff quickly, just use a Raspberry Pi. It's affordable and it has a huge community behind it, so that's great to start prototyping. But if your goal is to build for mass market, then NXP boards are the perfect choices because they contain something called a system on module that will simplify a lot of things. On the left, you can see a Raspberry Pi, and on the right, an NXP board. As you can see, they look like really, really similar. But if you look closely at the NXP board on the right, you will notice that it's actually composed of two boards stacked on top of each other. The top smaller board is a core compute module we refer to as a SOM, or system on module. And that small little chip has all the core elements required to run the operating system. It has a CPU, memory, radio, storage, everything, including your application and the operating system, is located inside that small system on module, that small board. And the base board that is underneath is finally just an extension that lets you connect multiple components during prototyping stage. So it's very good for mass market because you will only need to buy some system on modules, and you can create your own custom board underneath that only includes the components you need. This is an example of what you can do. Google engineers wanted to create a smart candle using with two LEDs and USB for power, but instead of using that large, ugly baseboard you can see on the left, they just took the system on module and created their own baseboard underneath that only includes the components they needed. So the custom board is smaller, cheaper to produce, and easy to build, because all the complicated software and hardware stuff is located inside the SOM, and you will not have to deal with that. Another advantage of using system on modules is that they are already pre-certified for regulator approval. You know, when you want to ship a product, you need to pass some certifications before it enters the market, like certifications for radio, Wi-Fi, for instance. And Android Things compatible SOMs are already pre-certified, so you will not have to go through this testing stage again, hence saving you time and money. So you understand now why Android Things is a perfect platform for prototyping, but also for production. Android Things is great. I think we all agree on that. But you know, there's actually another reason why I'm here today. It's to tell you about our world as human beings and about what's wrong in our society. As you know, humans don't use their brain to its full capacity. I mean, that's obvious. Look at codes, the code your coworkers write sometimes. You can see humans don't use their brain to its full capacity. Obvious. We are always distracted by media, entertainment, and politics. Also, borders, country lines lead to endless wars and conflicts. The reason for that, you know it, of course, it's because of reptilians. As you know, reptilians are aliens who are living on our planet and are controlling us since like thousands of years. And those lizard people are still living among us. And they are probably even organizing reptilian police, Devox. And it's crazy because reptilians have altered our DNA so we can't use our brain to its full capacity, making us easier to control. They control humans by distracting us with media, entertainment, and politics. They created the laws to restrict us, and they have, through the generations, ruled the world. And you can't tell it because they are shape-shifting. They take the appearance of humans like us. And until now, we could not do anything against them. We were totally harmless, and they were laughing at us. But now that Android Things is released, it's a different story. Here's how you can build a machine that detects and exterminates those lizard people. As you may know, humans are unable to detect reptilians, but artificial intelligence can. So we're just going to use TensorFlow, which is an open source library for machine learning developed by Google and currently used in many of their products like Search, Gmail, YouTube, Photos, and many more. If you haven't tried it yet, I really suggest you to take a look at those 3 code labs, TensorFlow for Poets code labs. They give you a great introduction of what TensorFlow is and what TensorFlow can do. Today, we will use a neural network model, an existing one made by Google, named Inception 3. And this neural network model was trained for a long time using millions of images to recognize fruits, objects, animals inside pictures. But we don't need to recognize fruits inside pictures. I mean, that's useless. What we need to do is recognize whether the person on the picture is or not a reptilian. This is what's important to us. So what we are going to do is we will retrain an existing neural network model to infer, to determine if the person on the picture is a human, a reptile, or a reptilian. And for that, we will first need to gather like a lot of images. So I downloaded many pictures of humans, reptiles, reptilians, and placed each of those in separate folders. One for each category, one for human, reptile, reptilians. Then we launch a script from the TensorFlow Git repository. This script downloads the Inception model, keeps the knowledge to recognize stuff, but just retrains it a little with our own data sample. So instead of recognizing fruits, it will retrain it to recognize human, reptiles, and reptilians instead, thanks to the image we provided. And once completed, this script generates 2 files, a protobuf retrained graph, which is our neural network model, it's a large file, and a labels text file that actually maps results from TensorFlow to human readable name. And those labels are actually the names of our folders. So this text file contains 3 strings, human, reptile, reptilian. And thanks to these files, TensorFlow can tell us what's inside the picture. We also need to optimize our graph so it can run with TensorFlow for Android, which has a limited subset of operations to be kept small. And for that, we launch a script named Optimize for Inference. Very quickly, retraining a neural network model takes a lot of time. It's something you usually do on a cloud or a desktop computer. It makes no sense really to retrain a neural network model on an Android phone. But what we want to do on Android is do something called inference, which means providing TensorFlow a picture so it can infer, it can determine what's inside this picture. So this script actually removes all specific operations for training, which are useless on Android, to just keep operations for inference. And that makes the model much, much smaller, and it can run on mobile on Android. OK, our model is retrained. Now we want to test it to make sure if it can really distinguish humans from reptilians. And for that, we will use the official TensorFlow classify sample already available in the GitHub repository, official GitHub repository, and we will use this project with our own retrained model. If you're curious, here's what the sample app actually does. First, it creates a TensorFlow inference interface class using a retrained model, and it also loads the generated labels files. For each picture that comes from the camera, the doRecognize method is called. The application first converts the bitmap from the camera into an array of pixels because the neural network model was trained with that data format, and we need to provide the same data format to be consistent. And then we feed TensorFlow with those pixels data. The sample apps run the inference up to a certain layer from the input node to the output node. And finally, we receive an array of confidence per category. So these small lines of code actually is all the inference steps. It's providing an image. So TensorFlow can fill up an outputs array, telling us, for instance, like this, when we provide this picture of a human, TensorFlow will fill the outputs array, and we can see this person is like 1% reptilian, 0% reptile, and 99% human. So we are confident this person is a real human. That's cool. Now we will test the neural network model, the retrained one, with a bunch of random pictures I found on the internet. First, the same random guy, a lizard, a reptilian, another random guy, and Obama photoshopped as a reptilian. Don't ask me why. I found that on the internet. Not my fault. OK, let's try the sample with our new retrained model. So you can see in the top, in blue, it will be written what TensorFlow infers. So this person is obviously like a human. 19% of chances it's a human, obviously. This is obviously a reptile. Like TensorFlow can recognize this is a reptile, giving us like 97% of chance it's a reptile. This is obviously a reptilian. This is actually funny because I don't know this guy, but TensorFlow tells us there are like 99% of chances this man is a reptilian. So if you see this man, run away, seriously. That's not cool. Obama photoshopped as a reptilian is like obviously a reptilian. Maybe we didn't need TensorFlow for that. And oh, with this man. Okay, TensorFlow can recognize jQuarton. And big problem here, TensorFlow detected jQuarton as half reptilian, half jQuarton, 50% each. And you know what it means? We didn't want to face that truth, but it turns out jQuarton is a crossbreed reptilian, according to TensorFlow, of course, not according to me. If you don't know this guy, he's one of the biggest contributors in the Android community, like Android developers, every Android developers know this guy. He's really, really smart. And actually, that can explain a lot of things, like especially why he's so much smarter than us. Because he actually can use his brain to its full capacity. And that's so obvious, the truth was right in front of us all along. That's crazy, but let's forget this for a while. Okay, we have tested our TensorFlow model, retrained graph, and it works like really well, like a little too well even. Oh, and if you wonder how TensorFlow could recognize the last person, jQuarton, is because I didn't tell you everything. I didn't create initially 3 different folders, human, reptile, reptilians, but I created 4 human, reptile, reptilians, and 1 with a lot of pictures of this guy, of jQuarton. So TensorFlow can detect it. And you can see how well TensorFlow can recognize faces and people when you provide enough data when you are retraining your model. Okay, our neural network model is okay, and it cannot distinguish a human from a reptile from a reptilian. And now we will need to create an Android Things project to embed this TensorFlow library and the TensorFlow network model inside an Android Things project. And for that, we can just start Eclipse, click on File, New Java Project. No, I'm joking, don't run away. We have no chances against reptilians if we use Eclipse, like, obviously. Let's start Android Studio 3 and create a new project. With Android Studio 3, you can create an Android Things project directly. You can see you can tick the Android Things box. And you can target safely API 27, which is Android Oreo, because Android Things is always up to date. Now let's take a look at the generated files. First, Android Studio generated an Android manifest file. As you can see, an Android Things project is very, very similar to an Android project. It requires an application and have activities and intent filters. When the Android Things device is powered on, the operating system will automatically start one of your activities. And to tell the system which activity it should start, you just have to add a new intent filter named IoT Launcher, so the boot system can understand which activity of your project it should start. So you can see it's really similar to what you already know with Android. There are just some slight differences, like the use library, Android Things, and the IoT Launcher intent filter, but you don't have to really care with that, because when you create an Android Studio project, the boilerplate is already generated, and you will not have to touch that anymore after. Android Studio also generated a very simple main activity, similar to any Android activities, and notice here the set content view call. You can manipulate layouts with Android Things, but you can also not to. It's up to you, whether your device has a screen or not. If you're building a paper-like robot, you will need a screen, and you can inflate your XML layouts and manipulate your view the same way you would do on a mobile application. Here's an example. I created a simple frame layout with 2 image views, one for a background and another one for a picture of a reptilian. And if you connect a supported screen to your Android Things board, it will work out of the box. You will just set content view and find view by ID is your view to get view references, and it will out of the box. I also applied here a rotate animation to the background, just to show you that you can apply animation the same way you would do on any Android project. You can do the same on Android Things. So nothing difficult here. You can use XML layouts if you want, but you can also not to. If you're building a Roomba-like robot, you won't need a screen, but you will still need an activity, because Android Things is Android. It requires an activity, and the activity will be the entry point of your application. So you will need an activity anyway, whether your device has a visual user interface or not. And instead of your visual user interface, you could consider adding a lot of different kinds of user interface, like a voice user interface if you prefer, using text-to-speech, for instance. And if you want to integrate text-to-speech to your Android Things project, it's the same way you would do on Android. Same APIs, because it's the same SDK. Finally, Android Studio generated a build.gradle file, and we can see that new dependency, which is specific to Android Things. And this library actually lets you communicate with external peripherals, like all those different stuff. Oh, and by the way, you don't need an electronic background to get started with Android Things. If you're new to electronics, which is my case, I suggest you to buy an Arduino starter kit, because those kits comes with a lot of different components, and instructions and code samples so you can understand how to plug those components and how to interact with those. And once you have fun with all those components, just take it and reuse those in your Android Things project, connecting those in your Android Things board directly. So if you're new to electronics, just buy a starter kit if you can, have fun with it, and then use all those components in your Android Things project. Oh, and if you don't know how to connect components to your Android Things board or to your Arduino, just search on the internet, you will find answers very, very easily. Okay, so how can we communicate with those peripherals? The Android Things library uses industry standard protocols such as GPIO, PWM, I2C, and others. And if you're not familiar with those terms, don't worry. It seems like really complicated, all those later, but it's not complicated at all. Those are just ways to interact with peripherals. And when you buy a component, it's usually specified which interface it uses. For instance, if you want to use this LCD screen, it specifies that it uses the I2C API. So you will just have to connect it to the I2C pins of your board and use the I2C interface to communicate with this. But let's do something easy first. Let's try to blink an LED. First, we connect the LED to our board. An LED is a GPIO device, so we can connect it to a GPIO pin of our board. For instance, this one named BCM4, but you have all the other BCM available. I just choose this one randomly. And you will find this picture on the Android Things website telling you where you have to plug components, because this is not something you can guess, like GPIO pins are at a certain place, UART pins too. So you will need this picture, and it's available on the Android Things website to help you connect components. Okay, and then we will use the Peripheral Manager service from the Android Things support library. This class gives us reference to external peripherals. And remember, our LED is a GPIO device connected to BCM4. So we just call the OpenGPIO method to have access to our LED, specifying which port, which is in this case BCM4. And in 2 lines, we already have a reference to our LED. Then to turn it on, we simply set its value to true. And now the LED will be always on. To turn it off, complicated, you need to set its value to false. Okay, that's all. If you want to blink an LED, that's not even 5 lines of code. And if you know basically what a Boolean is, I'm sure you can turn on LEDs easily. And of course, you can use prettier LEDs if you want to. Okay, back to our LCD screen. Remember the I2C device? Instead of opening a GPIO device, we will use the Peripheral Manager service to open an I2C device. And to display some text on the screen, we will simply need to call the write method of the I2C device, giving data inside a byte array. And that's all you have to know to communicate with components. Like you see, it's really device.write, and you provide data in a buffer, in the byte array, that's all. And as you've seen, communicating with external components is done at a high level using Java or Kotlin. Which means that if you want to create a driver to simplify using a component, for instance, if you want to create a library to scroll some text automatically on a matrix, on a pixel matrix, then you can just create a standard Android library and publish it on Maven Central, JCenter, whatever. Drivers are already available for all the components you see here and many, many more. If there are no drivers for a given component, to interact with components, either you do it manually, either you need a driver. If there are no driver for a given component, just find the specification and write the driver yourself. It's usually very easy. It takes some time, but it's usually very easy. Or just find the Arduino implementation and port it from C to Java. That's even easier. For instance, if you want to use this I2C screen for your IoT project, connect it to the I2C pins of your board, and once again, the internet can tell you how to. Import the existing driver made by the community or made by Google directly, and you can start using it and turn on pixels like the way you want. Here I'm just creating an instance of an SSD 1306, which is the external peripheral, and I just set pixel x equals 0, y equals 0 to true. That's very, very easy. And this driver also has a nice helper method, so you can send an Android bitmap directly to the peripheral. That's even better. So you can just decode the bitmap and set the bitmap data to the display directly. And 4 lines of code later, you have what you want. Now back to our Android Things application. To integrate the TensorFlow image recognition to your Android Things project, you have nothing special to do. Remember, we created an Android project earlier with TensorFlow. What we could do is just take this code and copy-paste it to our Android Things project created with Android Studio. Or even simpler, we could just fork the official TensorFlow sample from the Android Things repository on GitHub. That is basically the same. It's just an Android Things project with TensorFlow. And what we will do, we will clone this project and replace the default neural network model using our retrain network model like the one we did earlier. To take pictures, because we need to detect when a person is a reptilian. So we need to take pictures of people to know whether they are reptilians or humans. And we just need to buy a compatible camera connected to our board. And once we have plugged a compatible camera to our Android Things board, it will work out of the box. You will just need to use the Android camera APIs, the same you use on Android if you want to interact with the camera. If you're not into detecting lizard people, that's fine, I'm not judging you. Here is another example on why it's interesting for everyone to use TensorFlow on an IoT project. This device is used in a farm, and the farmer is actually using TensorFlow to sort cucumbers by size, shapes, colors, and other attributes. But you can really also, for instance, create a machine inside a factory that detects defected pieces in a production line and stops the production line, like when TensorFlow infers like there are 60% of chances the piece is broken. You could decide to stop the production line as fast as possible, fail fast. And that's really you have a lot of examples why it's interesting to embed artificial intelligence, machine learning inside IoT projects. Okay. Ideally, we want to take a picture when somebody is approaching our device. And for that, we will use an ultrasonic sensor. This sensor uses a sonar to determine distance to an object, like bats or dolphins do. So first, if you're interested to see how it works, you can see you have 2 GPIOs. So remember, like 2 booleans, trigger and echo. When the trigger GPIO, when the trigger boolean value is set to true, the module, this component, will start emitting a sound wave, like the one in yellow. And when the reflected wave comes back, the echo boolean will be set to true. So depending on how long it took to send a trigger and having an echo GPIO to true, with a simple mathematical formula, you can determine distance to an object. That's very simple. Okay, what we're going to do is we will import the Android Things driver made by Google or the community, so we can start using this cool component in our project. Oh, shit. There are no driver for that component yet. So what can we do? Like, remember, 2 options. Like, we have no time right now to create our own driver because it's like 12:30 already. And also today we are kind of lazy, so we will take option number 2, which is using an Arduino as a proxy. If a specific component requires a real-time operating system, remember Android is not real-time, or if you're too lazy to create a driver, just use an Arduino that will act as a proxy. So at least at the prototype stage, of course. So you connect the component to your Arduino. You write an Arduino sketch to use that component, and you will forward the distance. You see, in the loop method, I receive the distance to an object, and I forward it, printing it to the serial interface. Okay. My Arduino sketch is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say 5 lines of code. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just using Arduino as a proxy. It communicates with the component, and it forwards data using the serial interface. What we can do after is connect the Arduino to the Android Things board over USB directly. And in our Android Things project, we can read data from the USB port. Here I created a very simple live data wrapper that emits distance. It's like a reactive way to emits values sent by the Arduino over USB. So the Arduino is writing to the serial. I'm listening to the serial interface, and every time I have some data, I forward it via live data. So activities can observe from this live data and instantly be notified when data is coming from the serial interface. You can see the result in this video. When the camera is approaching, the distance on the log is smaller. So at the beginning, the camera is like 40 centimeters away, and then it's 7 centimeters away. Okay, so it works like cool. And what to do now? When somebody is 20 centimeters close to a machine, we will take a picture. And of course, if he's a reptilian, we should obviously kill him. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. We do not want to kill Jack Warden because even if he's not like us, he helps us so much, we just can't do that. But you have the idea. So we detect, and when somebody is 25 centimeters close to a machine, we will take a picture. If this TensorFlow infers that the person is a reptilian, we will kill him. We have detected reptilian, that's cool. But now we need to to exterminate reptilians. And for that, I found 3 possible ways. Option 1, using a gun. So first, you will need to buy a servo motor. A servo motor is a PWM device that can move its needle from 0 to 180 degrees. So you connect it to the PWM pins of your board because it's a PWM device, and you will see connecting peripherals. After all, it's very easy, it's like Lego. Then you import the official servo driver. You initialize it, that's just a boilerplate. Here I'm just telling that I want a servo motor, and this servo can move from 0 to 180 degrees. And we move the servo motor to the angle we want using the set angle method. So here, when I'm pressing the button, I set the angle to 0, and when I'm pressing the button again, I'm setting the angle to 42 degrees. So you can see, to move a servo motor, which is to move a needle from 0 to 180 degrees, it's like one line of code. Servo.angle equals the angle you want. Then to exterminate reptilians, we will need a rope and a gun. You attach everything together, and when a reptilian is detected, you move the servo to a different angle so that the rope can pull the trigger, as you can see in that video. That's just easy. One line of code to kill people, actually. Now let's arm the gun and try again. Slow-mo. Okay. Oh, and of course, you hide the gun behind the fake wall. Otherwise, people will walk, will see a gun, and you will have trouble, obviously. But you know what? Option 1 is not really a good solution because first you need a gun, and that's not very legal. So I decided to go to option number 2, which is totally legal, which is building your own flamethrower. And I won't do any live demo today. I'm sorry for that because, you know, live demo always fail eventually, and I don't think you will like me a lot if you're on fire. To build your own flamethrower, once again, you will need your best friend, which is a servo motor. But this one is not powerful enough, so let's take a stronger one. That's exactly the same stuff. It's just more expensive, but it has the same number of wires, 3 wires, and you connect it the same way to your Android Things board, and you, again, set angle 0, set angle 180, whatever you want. Okay, so we just bought a heavier, stronger servo motor. You will also need some rubber bands, a candle, and a flammable spray. Important detail here, when you are buying your spray, search for the flammable picto. If there are none, don't buy. That's crazy because now people sell alcohol-free deodorants. Why would you need something like that? You attach everything together and you try moving the servo. Okay, it works. Now you just hide the candle. And when a reptilian is detected, you just change the angle programmatically so it can throw inflammable liquid onto the candle. Well, you can see my flamethrower is not really impressive. So that's cool, but I need to, it's a prototype. In production, it's much better. And you can take a look at other people did the same, but much better than me. Yeah, it's basically the idea. It's the same. It's a servo motor that press on flammable spray onto a candle, that's all. And please don't do that at home, kids, or anywhere. And you know, my flamethrower was not impressive also because I didn't want to die stupidly. And as you can see, this machine is controlled remotely. It's remotely controlled. And if you want to add remote control feature to your Android Things device, you just use the Bluetooth LE API, the Nearby Connections API, an embedded HTTP server, whatever you prefer and works on Android already. Okay, but the flamethrower was not violent enough. So let's exterminate reptilians with option number 3, which is using a chainsaw. That would be much better. And for that, first you will need a relay module. And to understand what electronics modules are, you have to think it's similar to a Java library. You know, Java libraries are a lot of complicated stuff gathered and accessible over a very simple contract. And an electronic module is the same. It's a lot of different components gathered, but I can control it with a simple interface, with a simple contract. And in this case, a relay module allows us to control high voltage devices like a chainsaw or other stuff. And we will control it using the same API to turn on or off LEDs, which is the GPIO API. Remember, if we want to turn on our chainsaw, we will just set the value to true, thanks to this relay. We will just connect our chainsaw to the relay and another wire to connect the relay to our Raspberry Pi. Because of course we cannot just connect a chainsaw to a Raspberry Pi. It will break directly. So we just use a relay, set the value to true, it will turn on or off the chainsaw. It's really perfect for home automation coupled with the Google Assistant. But come on, we are not here for home automation today. We will use a relay module to turn on or off a chainsaw. Here's the plan, so you can appreciate my game skills. When a reptilian is detected, a relay module will start the chainsaw. The chainsaw is hidden inside the fake roof, and the chainsaw will fall down to our target, and reptilian will be solved. And for that, to exterminate reptilians with a chainsaw, we will need another component, which is a key component. It's an LED strip. This is really the key component. We need an LED strip first because it's pretty and it will add some colors of a reptilian blood. It should look great. And here is what it looks like. You can see the colors are changing, first green, blue, purple. I actually used an LED strip here to show you that you can use any components from the Android SDK into your Android Things projects. And to animate the LED strip and changing colors, I use path and value animators. Here it's just a value animator that iterates over the color spectrum and for 8 seconds. And every time we are notified, we have an update listener that will give us the new color. And we simply get the LED colors and write it to our LED strip. That's really, really simple. And then to animate the chainsaw, like to set the speed, I use the value animator with a custom path interpolator with a predefined speed. So first the chain is moving like very, very slowly at 2.5 frames per second, and then really, really quickly at 50 frames per second, and then it's moving slowly. And that's fun because with Android Things, you can really use all the Android SDK components into your IoT or embedded projects. And when value animators were created initially, you know, value animators are used to animate views. Like nobody would have guessed one day some people would use this API to kill people on a chainsaw. And value animators can kill people, and that's really insane. I think we are done already. Reptilians are like a friend now. To conclude, Android Things is fun. It's easy to get started. The chainsaw project was made like in what, like not even 1 hour, not even that, yeah. You can, if you already know Android, it's so easy to get started. You just start Android Things, you use the same API, that's so cool. And if you don't know Android yet, maybe that's the perfect occasion to get started because now we have a cool IDE, we have a cool language. Like that's the perfect occasion to get started, creating your IoT project with Android Things, and then reuse everything you know to create mobile application with Android. In only a few days, you can start creating nice projects, even with no electronics background. Android Things really accelerate and simplify the development of secured IoT devices. And just try Android Things, really. You will learn new things. You will make fun or useful stuff. You already know how to create apps. Now you can make devices. That's like huge. That's all for me. Feel free to follow me on Twitter for fun stuff. Slides are already available online. You can just take a picture of the slides if you want. Check the slides later. It contains footnotes on almost each slide, giving you code samples and more explanation on how to make all those projects. I'll be around today. We also have time for questions. So if you have time for questions, feel free to ask now. And thank you for your attention.